Hello, everybody. So today I am going back to the roots of the channel, that is my spreadsheet and my style of investing. Out of the three broad style of investing that I have, my one style of investing is about cheap growth, inexpensive growth, disruptive stocks, innovative stocks, stocks that follow an S-curve of adoption, but where the growth is also cheap and where we have a satisfactory rule of 40, i.e. I don't want the businesses to go bankrupt, and so that's why I don't invest in pre-revenue companies. So, this spreadsheet is more than 150 stocks, and I've come to the habit of making thematic videos and thematic commentaries. So this is going to be a thematic commentary on payments and neobanks stocks and payment stocks. So let me just get started, and I'll tell you a little bit what I think about each stock, which stock I own, which stock I don't own, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's get started with Shift4. So Shift4 is a stock that I own. It's an entry-level position. I was lucky to get that stock after their merger failed. They were supposed to do a merger. They were putting themselves up for sale, and no merger ever happened. The stock dropped. It went back up. Shift4 focuses, of course, on payments in the US, mostly in the hospitality industry, big restaurants, big sports venues. One of the main distinction of Shift4, it is actually a competitor of Toast, but while Toast has a bottom-up approach where they go to restaurants and then they move up to bigger chains, Shift4 has a top-down approach where they go right after the big stadium or the big casino and they handle all of the payments of a hospitality company. Shift4, I usually don't talk about the CEOs of my company, but the CEO of Shift4 is an actual rock star. He was on the SpaceX mission. He's a big Elon Musk admirer and, I presume, friend. Jared Isaacman is his name, is a very inspirational 39-year-old CEO. Quite impressive. That's a company that he actually started as a high schooler, from what I understand. Moving on to another stock in this sector, which is StoneCo, STNE. I still own the stock. It's been dead money, as people on the Discord have been saying of my channel. It's been dead money, and I know fully it's dead money, and it's one of these stocks that I have on my blog for tax loss harvesting. My average on it is something like a 14, so that won't be much money. That won't be much of a percentage to tax loss harvest. We'll see. I'm waiting for the next earnings. We'll see what's going on. In the meantime, this is a company that is piling cash, right? The EBITDA margin is 50%. The growth was much higher in the past. It's disappointing now at 14% revenue growth. But, the thing that gives me pause, the thing that gives me owning StoneCo and sleeping well at night is that 50% EBITDA margin. As I've joked many times talking about StoneCo, StoneCo, they're in the cash piling business. The stock, unfortunately, is not doing much. I have a lot of hoping on the next quarter. We'll see how that goes. But if not end of year right now, this is one of his tax loss harvesting stocks for me. PayPal, a stock that I do not own. PayPal, there's nothing much for me to tell you about PayPal, except that with only 8% of forward revenue growth, it's not enough to get me excited. PayPal is the mature payment company. PayPal is the company that everybody else is trying to disrupt, and thus I would not be interested, no matter how many popular YouTubers are saying, oh, PayPal is so cheap. Well, yeah, it's cheap, but it's cheap for a reason. It grows about 50% slower than the rate of monetary growth. The only thing that I like about PayPal is their PayPal USD, their blockchain initiatives. I like that, but you gotta buy the whole pie, the whole company, just to get one segment that you like. And therefore, as a result of that, I am not in this stock. Another stock that I like, which is Square. I like Square, but I've always found it expensive, and I've always found it a little slow growth. It's okay, right? It makes EBITDA margin of 4%, but because of that slow growth, it doesn't even reach a rule of 40. It's a rule of 20. So I'm not interested, but I think Square, and sure enough, it's in a lot of ETF, it's in a lot of fintech ETF. I mean, I don't think anybody could be faulted for owning Square. They own the Cash App. The Cash App is the number one payments app in the US. It's like that's the app. That's the main app, and they own it, and they're into Bitcoin. So a lot of good things to like about Square, or Block as they call it now, right? But to me, it's an expensive stock, and it's gonna remain an expensive stock. Now, a stock that I used to own, but that I tax loss harvested a while back was DLocal. DLocal, not much to say. They enable payment in a lot of emerging nations, in a lot of new markets. They enable payments for big companies, so Microsoft Office Suite, Netflix subscription, whatever you name it. If you are operating in a small African nation, for example, and you want to be able to pay to get yourself the latest Office Suite, well, you're going to need to coordinate with local payment methods. And so it coordinates local payment methods with these big providers of online services. Interesting business. Unfortunately for me, it was a tax harvest candidate, and I did that already. My one issue about DLocal, and of course a lot of innovative stocks, by definition they're gonna be attacked by short sellers, but DLocal has been particularly sensitive to anything a short seller does to this stock, much more than any other stock. You know, I've owned a lot of stocks that are attacked by short sellers. It's a common thing, and it doesn't faze me. But DLocal is just so much more brutal, right? You think SMCI is bad when it gets attacked by that short seller? Look at the DLocal chart whenever they got attacked by that one short seller. 3 times in a row, the stock loses 50% in a day. 50% in a day. So it's like, to me, you know, I'm out. It was a tax loss harvest. I could be back in. We'll see. But right now, it is. I mean, on the metrics, it looks very good, right? But I have StoneCo. Keep in mind, StoneCo looks better on the metrics. So I have StoneCo, and StoneCo is good enough. The question is, how many payments company does one want in Latin America, especially for DLocal, right? A lot of Latin America. How many payments companies does want to be invested in? Okay, moving on to Paycom. So as far as Paycom goes, it's a stock. Again, it's the quote unquote more established player in that payment space. To me, not a lot to be excited about. The growth is slow at 15%. Of course, I'm a growth snob, but it barely keeps pace with monetary inflation. I mean, sure, the numbers are fine, but how much am I paying for that growth? I'm paying a 0.51, so it's a no-go. Rule of 40, kudos, it's a 52. That's really great. Now, why is it a 52? Because it's in the cash piling business. And sure enough, that's what a lot of businesses are in. A lot of businesses are in the cash piling business because you're just a leech. I don't want to say a leech, but you know what I mean. You're just a tax on transaction. You're a tax on the velocity of money. The more the money changes hands, the more a population is young and spending and in their, you know, like family founding stage. That's why a lot of Latin America stocks like this do well. For a lot of people, spending, entertainment, whenever you do that transaction, it's a toll, right? These companies have a take rate. They take what, 1 to 3% depending, and that's that toll rate on the oscillation of the money changing hands, i.e. on the velocity of capital. This company take a rent. That's their position. That's why they are all in the cash piling business in one way or another. And it's a good transition for me to talk about both Visa and MasterCard. Let me talk about these two together. So Visa and MasterCard, I mean, 98%, 99% gross margin. Have you ever seen that? You usually only see that in royalty companies, and in these companies, that's how much money they make. So these companies, again, they have a number one payment providers, and they are highly established, and they've maximized their operating leverage, and there are companies which, from a rule of 40, is as exciting as one could possibly find, right? At an 80 or a 74, this is top. But look at that price, EV over GP over RG. How much am I paying for that growth? I'm paying a 1.5 roughly for those two. So it's growing less than money inflation, right? Monetary inflation is at 15%. This is growing at 10%. So you're getting a third less than money inflation, right? These companies just grow with the payment volume. They just grow with the world's payment volume. And keep in mind, but this is true for all of these, you have some threats, right? So you have Apple Pay. Apple Pay is one of those threats, although they still use the Visa, MasterCard, and the credit card rail in general. That's one threat, but you also have the very long term, I'm going to call it a very long-term threat, but you have a very long-term threat of stable coins, of course. And last time I looked at Coinbase, I was showing you, USDC accepted here. That's becoming a thing in a lot of, Silicon Valley type places, tech-oriented type places. So you have the threat of crypto in the background. But of course, you also have the threat of business competition and these countries each competing. And sure enough, for StoneCo, that's the case. For StoneCo, we see the impact of PIX, the Brazilian CBDC in Brazil, the impact that it's had on PIX, right? What if a CBDC is launched in a lot of countries? Maybe not the US, but what if Europe launches one of them? There's a lot of business to be lost. There's a lot of attacks, a lot of competitive attacks against the Visa and the MasterCard. Yes, they're extremely profitable, but to me, that's paying up too much for that growth. And sure enough, the valuation that you see, right, enterprise value over forward revenue at a 15. Sure enough, a lot of this can also be explained that they are among the top 10, top 15 in the indices, whether it's the NASDAQ or the S&P 500, they're going to be in the top 10 to top 15. These are each $500 billion company. And so you have that inflation that comes associated with being at the top of the index, which is why they look so expensive. Now, let's look at Dave. I don't have much to say about Dave. Dave is a small fintech that allows you to compare your options for loans online. It's growing at 23%. That's no good for me. Sure, they're not losing money, 1% EBITDA. Sure, gross margin is 57%. How much am I paying from that growth? Yeah, that's low as a 0.12. So that's pretty low. I should have highlighted that in green. I forgot. That's really low, but it's a 24. It's a 24. So rule of 40 again doesn't get me excited, even though it's a cheap stock. That growth is too low for me. Now let's talk about a stock that this time gets me excited. I am sorry, I still have to cover it. I haven't had time with MicroStrategy and me covering MicroStrategy lately. I haven't had time to cover Kaspi. So Kaspi is one of the leading e-commerce super app. It's a fintech. It's an e-commerce site in Kazakhstan, but they also bought this e-commerce player in Turkey, and I can't pronounce the name off the top of my head of that company. But now they are going to have about 100 million people between Turkey and Kazakhstan. But what I find extremely special about this company, Kaspi, is that EBITDA margin at 77%. This is mostly a bank/turned fintech app that's highly, highly profitable. And so when you add good growth, not great growth, but close enough to the 30% that I seek at 25%. But when you add that to a 77% EBITDA margin, which again has got to be one of the highest EBITDA margins I've ever seen, right? It's higher than Visa. Think about that. It's the highest in this. It's the highest in any spreadsheet I could come up with. You get 102, rule of 40 over 102. So am I willing to give up 5% less than what I usually seek in the top line growth? Am I willing to give up 5% less in top line growth in order to get maybe 70% more in gross margin than I would ideally want? Absolutely. What do they do with that cash? I will do that in a full analysis. Are they doing buybacks with that cash? Well, they're doing some acquisitions for now. We'll see if that pays off, but I think this is a highly profitable business. I'm going to cover it. And of course, Kaspi itself was too the target of a short seller. It's like every stock I like, short sellers dislike. Let's talk about MoneyLion. So I should talk about MoneyLion. you know, for some reason, from a distance, right, without studying this stock too much, I had the payday loan feel when I first looked at MoneyLion. Now I realize it's a more holistic story. Although they have an early paycheck program that seems to be under attack by the Financial Protection Bureau or something. You know, I need to do a deep dive on MoneyLion. I really do, because it looks good on many of my metrics. First of all, it's EBITDA profitable 14%, gross margin is 52%, the growth is 25%. How much am I paying for that growth? I'm paying a 0.09, so that is the cheapest stock out of all of the Neobank and the payment stock. That is the cheapest stock I can buy. And I'm going to be kind. I'm going to give them the rule of 40 here, because they're at 39.2. I am giving them the rule of 40. They're at the rule of 40. So this stock checks all the mark. All it needs, though, is me doing a full qualitative analysis, because you can only uncover red flags when you do qualitative analysis on these stocks, right? So like that Financial Bureau thing, I haven't looked into that. I gotta study that. What if they get a fine, right? If they get a big fine, that could entirely kill the business, right? So qualitative analysis precedes quantitative, right? Quantitative is something you do after, or ever you do quantitative analysis before, and once you see the numbers that are good, then you go and you dig and you validate the qualitative aspect of the company. I haven't done that for MoneyLion, and I haven't done that either for Remitly. Now, of course, Remitly is also pretty cheap. How much am I paying for the growth of Remitly? It's a 0.14. The rule of 40 is a 48. Now, I'll tell something about Remitly. I live in Texas, right? A lot of Spanish speakers where I speak. I see Remitly ads on the highway all the time. I see their ads on the highway in Spanish, big and bold ads when I drive. And I don't know if it's because we're having a campaign right now, but I've been aware, like my mind share of Remitly is very high. And I don't know about my viewers, but if you live in the US, if I ask you what about a cross-border payment, what would you name, right? Is the highest mind share still Western Union, or would Remitly come up? And I can tell you, for me, Remitly would come up, because I've heard of it. They've advertised a lot in my area. I don't know how it is in other area. There's a lot of competition in this space. The most obvious one to me, as someone who's been covering Bitcoin on MicroStrategy since the beginning of the channel, you know that I view blockchain transactions, that I view cryptocurrencies. I see that as a competitor. Now the question is it a long-term competition, or is it a medium-term competition? That's one of the questions to ask. I've read too many books about Bitcoin talking about the dangers of these systems, right? If you go if you're a recipient of one of these payment methods like Western Unions, like where like let's say you go to like a more dangerous country. Where do you think a lot of the criminals hang out? Where do you think a lot of the crime happens, right? It's often near those remittance businesses, near those places where you can pick up your remittance. That's actually something that a lot of books I've read about talks about. So again, it's an important business. It's a business that feels a need in the marketplace, but is that need in the marketplace still being fulfilled via Web 2 rails? And really Web 3 rails are what you should use to fulfill that, because Web 3 rails, you don't have to go through cash, you don't have to use cash. Anyways, so done with the tangent here. I may be wrong. I need to study it. It's on my list. I will study Remitly. I may be wrong. And I think it would be wise to compare this to Western Union and MoneyGram and all these other companies. Let me move on to my neobanks, and I own these two. I own both SoFi and NuBank, and every time I've covered them, I used to be covering them more a year ago when they were cheaper. I used to say, I don't know which one to choose, and it's funny. I still don't know which one to choose. I like them both. I have a little more actually they're roughly equal positions for me, but it's tougher to know because NuBank I have leaps on I have many leaps on NuBank. SoFi I don't have any leaps. SoFi is just straight equity, but NuBank I have both leaps and I have equity. So I'm bullish on both stocks, to be honest here. Bullish on both stocks. The question is always, is a spreadsheet based on revenue growth? In my spreadsheet, the main input is for revenue growth. Is that fair to use for companies that lend money? And of course, in my view, the answer to that is not really, because the trade-off between making money and increasing revenue for a bank, that trade-off is almost 100% there, right? It's like you're gonna, if you want to grow, you're gonna do a bunch of risky loans. You're gonna make less money. You're gonna have to lose money on more loans, but you're gonna grow much faster, which is always my issue of using this spreadsheet with these banks. But it's, I guess I have to, because the spreadsheet I use everywhere. So when I look at SoFi, let's assume they grow 30%. I think that's what they'll do over the next 12 months. Their gross margin, and again, I calculated that by hand, right? Financial companies, you don't calculate gross margin as straightforward as any other companies. But by hand, when I input my numbers by hand, I get to 82%, and I get a 25% EBITDA margin, although I get to that looking at the income of the company, by the way. So anyways, the metrics are different for banks. But let's assume all of my metrics here work. Let's assume they're good proxies. That would be a 0.25. How much am I paying for it? Over 0.25. Now the beauty with the banks is that they're profitable, 25 and 31%. So for SoFi, I get a rule of 55, well above the rule of 40. I love that. And when it comes to NuBank, I get a rule of 78. Now you're getting into very rare air, very rarefied air. When you get near 80, you're getting rarefied air. I mean, to give you an example, it's one of the highest here. Kaspi aside, it's one of the highest. It's up there with Visa and MasterCard at 78, right in between, in fact. So NuBank, top Latin American neobank, net promoter score through the roof. Highly loved company. Their customers love them. They love the credit card. They do a lot of branding. People watch a lot of TV events, soccer, etc. They see the brand. This is a bank that I can't remember the net promoter score off the top of my head. They have a super positive net promoter score, kind of like Amazon. How many people recommend Amazon to their friends? It's like 97%. NuBank is something like that. How many people recommend NuBank to their friends? It's like almost everybody. So that's how much this company is loved. This neobank is loved. They're forwarded to grow at 47% next 12 months, so still growing fast from a much higher base than SoFi. So in many ways, NuBank is quote-unquote a more stable stock because it is a $61 billion company. It's a bigger company. A lot of people see the NuBank opportunity. And NuBank, of course, for me, one of the things that I look forward is, are they going to enter the US market at some point via the Spanish-speaking community here? Are they going to do that? And if they did that, that could be enormous. All of a sudden, you could access a lot of international remittance business, for example, and you could access many more stuff. So I look forward to that. I own both roughly equal positions. I plan to exercise my options on NuBank when they come due in 2026. So I will have equal positions when it's all said and done. But love these two neobanks very much. And of course, that's just me. That's not financial advice. Nothing on this channel is investment advice. It is just entertainment. I appreciate you watching and supporting my work. Please like, please subscribe. Follow me on Patreon if you want to have access to everything I do and my spreadsheet and all the premium content that I try to provide. I'm slowly building it. Follow me on X. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day.